The goal is to create eventually a premium section that provides a custom ad-free podcast feed with bonus content, and I have a lot of other ideas too. Um, but it needs a standard sign-in, create account process, like the ability to take payments, needs some way to store data, a database or something. And, you know, at this time around, I'm not planning to create my own database management system. Like I mentioned recently in an episode on creating my own SaaS application. That was a mistake. We're not going to repeat that one. So I'll talk about what I chose for that. Um, and I also want to continue building with React Server components to try them out. So I already built the new version of the reactshow.com with Next.js 13 using the experimental app directory / React Server component support. So I'm sort of going off of that. It's just extending that. So I'm going to continue using that architecture. But I also had to, like I said, find a way to store data, a database. There are a lot of options, and I feel like a lot of people that I, talk to, and a lot of places I work choose things that I find to be kind of higher maintenance or just kind of a pain to work with, especially if you're talking serverless, that kind of thing. I went the opposite. I chose something very simple, uh, SQLite. So SQLite, if you're not familiar with it, is a relational database system, SQL, and it is designed to be super simple, lightweight, and reliable. So it's just stored in one file. You don't have to install anything. There's no real configuration that needs to be done. Just super simple. It's rock solid. It's used all over the place. And I like it just because it's so simple and has so little maintenance required. And if you're not building a giant thing with tons of users, it's more than sufficient when it comes to, features that you might need for that kind of thing. And one of the most exciting things is with React Server components, I can directly make database calls right in components. It's simple, it's fast, it's been working really well. So I'm not using a serverless architecture. I find those to be, let's see, how do we say this? They can be faster to scale potentially. I don't know if I think with my level of experience, sort of running databases and websites and stuff, I don't know if this is as true for me. I know for a lot of people it might be because you don't have to learn how to administer your own system. For me, I already know how to do that. So serverless just isn't a huge benefit for me. I feel like I can scale most things quite a ways with just a simple Linux box. In this case, I'm not expecting huge loads or anything, so it's really not a big deal. So just looking for something very simple, and I'm currently running the website on a virtual private server, and I can just have my database there and use it sort of old school. Yeah. So that's what I chose for the database, and I've done it before. It works fine. I'm happy with that, and it should be very, very low maintenance. I don't have to worry about being on Heroku and using Postgres, and they're like, "Oh, we're upgrading the library. We're changing the extensions. You have by this date to go in and update a whole bunch of stuff or whatever." SQLite isn't going to change like that. I'll be able to run this probably for years and years without changes, which I love. Low maintenance. So another thing, and maybe even more interesting to a lot of people, is I am using something called CapRover to deploy the website. And this includes everything I've been talking about so far, the database, everything. So what is CapRover? CapRover is essentially a PaaS, like Heroku, but it's open source and self-hosted. So I just installed CapRover on my virtual private server, which was a very simple process, very easy to do. Um, and then beyond that, I can deploy Docker images to that instance, to my server. And it's very much like Heroku, where you can set it up with a source control system. You can deploy branches. You can do all sorts of stuff. Very similar to what you might be familiar with in other PaaS systems. Of course, the big difference is it's all completely self-hosted. It's I have found it to be very low maintenance. It's going to be slightly more maintenance than probably running on Heroku or something. But again, for me, it's not a big deal. I really like it. It's easy to set up, and it has so many really nice features that I just don't have to mess with. Like I have enough experience. I can set up my own Linux box and configure Nginx and configure everything myself manually. But I like quick and easy and low maintenance. And CapRover makes it so I can have reliable deployments, fallbacks, automatic HTTPS setup. I can deploy branches for testing. It has auto restarts if the app crashes, and lots of other features that I just don't have to mess with or configure, and it just works. So that's fantastic. I've used CapRover on a few projects now, and I wouldn't say it's the most full featured or developed. I'm not necessarily saying you should go out and use it, but I've had great success with it. I really enjoy using it. And hey, I guess I'm being cheap too. It's a lot cheaper than Heroku or anything like that I know of. And I think in general, less maintenance. Um, yeah, so that's CapRover. I just made a simple Docker image that gets deployed to it. Um, Beyond that, I think another interesting thing to people is the way that I developed a lot of the interactivity. So there's forms. I created the sign in, create account, and all that kind of stuff from scratch, just using Tailwind for styling. And with React Server Components, I just went kind of what you'd call old school. So it's pure server-side form-based forms. I really love it. It's so simple. I don't need any extra client-side validation. I can just put all the validation inside the server-side components, and I am passing. Like if I need to, like let's say somebody submits to create an account and the account's already taken. I just use query parameters to pass that message back to the page they were on. That page, says, "Oh, look, this query param says the account was already taken." So I'll display a message to the user showing that it was already taken, or if they didn't include a password or whatever it might be. So I have complete server-side validation, which you should always do, and I think always start with. Client-side validation, that can always be bypassed. So you should always have your server-side validation. And the cool thing is with the React Server Components, you really don't need to create any React-specific client-side validation. I am employing basic HTML5 client-side validation, just using tags. And I think that'll work fine for a long time. I can always go back and add fancier React client-side validation. But this was super quick, super easy, super reliable. Just another reason why I'm really enjoying React Server Components, to be honest. But yeah, I think I don't see many people developing this way, and you don't even need React Server Components to do it. It just makes it easier if you're writing things in React. But yeah, I just think it's a lot simpler because you always need server-side validation. And previously with React projects, it, I think, required a lot more code because you had to have client-side support for handling messages and handling a lot of it that you don't really need anymore. And it's just a lot simpler. Just like, oh, submit the page, make my database calls, and return the result. I know if you've been doing web development for a while, you're probably like, oh yeah, that's super old school. That's how we've done things forever. It works well. But I know a lot of people aren't as familiar with that, and I think it works really well. And yeah, so that's what I chose. I'm really happy with it. We'll see how it goes. Maybe I'll change my mind and I'll abandon React server components and all of this. Yeah, it's all part of the experiment. We'll see what happens.